This is Inspirational Women, a weekly series shining the spotlight on female trailblazers making a true difference in our community. Once again, here is Kate Daniels.
Now, further direction about women and work, and this is truly incredible insights and affirmation. Misty Heggeness is co-director of the Kansas Population Center, Associate Professor of Economics and Public Affairs at the University of Kansas, and former Principal Economist and Senior Advisor at the US Census Bureau. Plus, she's been writing an important book, now freshly out, Swiftynomics, How Women Mastermind and Redefine Our Economy. And we get to hear some of the stories. Misty Heggeness, good morning. It is really wonderful to have you join us this morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
I am really grateful that we have this opportunity. For so many reasons. One of them is economics, the idea of finances, the idea of money has always been this overwhelming thing for me. And I figure there are people who know this better. Oftentimes we think men know this better. I'll defer to that. Well, here you are helping us to turn that idea upside down, because with this new book, Swiftynomics, How Women Mastermind and Redefine Our Economy, you're making economics really interesting, relatable, accessible, fun to learn about and understand. So major kudos to you for making all of that happen.
Thank you. That was my goal, so I'm glad to hear you say that.
Success, right? And so, yes, this book really, it's so relatable. We can really, you've done it. And that's the thing with stories that we can connect with, really put across really important ideas. And part of that, and it comes across in the book, is this whole idea of authenticity. That just really is so core to all of it. And I think that's why, again, it's relatable and we think, oh, this means me too.
Yeah. It's a big, one of the three major concepts in the book is really, figuring out your own preferences, your own desires, where you want to get to at the end of your existence or your life, and really sticking true to that as you maneuver a path in society today and in our economy today.
And of course, by sharing these stories through an icon like Taylor Swift, who we all can relate to in large or small measure, me, until more recently, it's been smaller measure. But again, I think with the Eras Tour, we all really saw just this incredible, not just event, but a whole concept of things changing and just kind of a new world, and really appealing to all ages, but certainly these younger women.
Yeah, I think the Eras Tour exposed us a little bit to the power of Taylor Swift. So I think she's always been powerful throughout her career. So, she started when she was a teenager, and she really built a fandom, a really strong fandom. And one of the ways that she did that was, by interacting with them on social media, leaving Easter eggs for them of what she was going to do next, what her next album might be, and just making it a really fun relationship with fans. And she was so good at that she got to a point where she didn't even need to market her albums anymore. She didn't need to, she didn't need to do the late night talk show circuit if she didn't want to. And she could just put an album out and all of her fans were following her and would know. So if you weren't on the Taylor Swift bandwagon as a Swiftie or as a fan, it's really easy to kind of in your head have this idea of her as some teenage girl, some teenage white girl who likes to sing country music, because that's really, the initial Taylor that we all knew back then. So I think what the Eras Tour did was it basically shined a light for the rest of us on the impact that she has had culturally, socially, in society, and also just the economic power, not only of Taylor, but also all of her fans.
Yes, this was phenomenal. So my saying, I came in more with the Eras Tour at the end of it by watching the documentary, if you will. Yeah. Because certainly, it was a big thing here in Seattle. It was sold out, as it was everywhere. But somehow I was still out here on the margins. And then it was really my husband who said, we need to watch this documentary. Well, then I was just enthralled and mesmerized and really just in awe of this young woman and what she was capable of accomplishing. So much change, so much attraction, but recognizing others. I mean, there was such an element of that acknowledgement of gratitude that really shone through that I thought was so amazing and important.
Yeah, so she, Taylor is really down to earth. I mean, she's, after the Eras Tour, she's now a billionaire. But you probably wouldn't know it if you just ran into her on the street. She, is really humble. She really prioritizes connections with other people. She learns about the people in her circle. She learns about their lives. She asks them questions, and she's just really authentic in that way. And, I think that shines through whenever she is up on stage or, this recently the iHeart Music Awards happened, and, her speech on stage, she won, I think, 7 awards. This was on March 26th. She won like 7 awards, and they just gave them all to her at once. Time savings, I think, for the award show. But she went up and she just said, if you're into Easter eggs, you believe that she's basically prepping her fans for a new release of her very first debut album. But she gave this speech about how when she was younger, she could spend hours and hours kind of honing her craft in her own room before anybody knew who she was. And, she talks about how she wants that for all the other artists out there and all the other singers out there. And she gave a little nod to kind of the vulnerability of the internet today and putting your stuff out too soon in a public domain because people will attack it. And so she really, she's a great mentor. She really brings other women up in the music industry. And the fun thing that I really like about Taylor is she never talks about this as specifically being a gender thing. If you were to go out on the street and ask people, oh, do you see Taylor Swift as a feminist? People who just kind of tangentially follow her would probably say no. And they might say no because, they see, see her as this younger teen who likes country music, and sparkles and pink and cats. But if you actually follow her closely and you listen to the lyrics of her music especially the music of the past decade, and you look at how she builds up and supports other women within the industry, how she swats away at really misogynistic behavior. There was a Colorado DJ who grabbed her rear end and, took her to court because he lost his job, and then she countersued him. And so she just really is a heavy advocate of female pride, female advancement, and just such an amazing role model and, and mentor, I think, for all of us.
Yes. And you mentioned that in the book because, of course, she figures quite a lot in the book. And I'd forgotten about that event taking place with that particular DJ. And it was such a good reminder of, holding her ground, not being apologetic, which can very easily happen and does happen. But no, this was a great model of how to stand our ground and call an act for what it is. Yes, and that was a great countersuit that she had.
Yeah, no, it was really impressive. And she, after she won that countersuit, she countersuited for $1. She won. He lost his case. She was on the stand, and his lawyer asked her, "Do you feel bad that because of you, this guy lost his job?" And she was on the stand and she said, "I am not responsible for the acts of his behavior and for the things that he chooses to do." So she's just so good at, like you said, standing her ground, telling her truth, being really authentic with it, not letting kind of the traditional stereotypes and, misogynistic thinking about how women are supposed to behave or what women are supposed to put up with. She doesn't, get lost in that space. Mm-hmm. It's nice to see.
Yes. Having that real great sense of self, being authentic. So really underscores it. And again, the book tells these various stories. So again, what an important read for all of us, regardless of age and gender too. Swiftynomics, How Women Mastermind and Redefine Our Economy. Yes, I love it. It's so great. It's so part of, well, using again Taylor and how she has become so successful. Another key element here is reinvention. You've experienced it in your life and have made me think about, well, yeah, I've done that too. So it's important to really bring that to the forefront to see what it is.
Yeah, reinvention is a really important concept. And what I wanted to do with this book was really destigmatize it. And so I think, a lot of us feel like maybe we failed when we're trying to go down some career path or some sort of path, and something happens outside of our control within that environment that really forces us, or, we choose to take a different path. Say you studied law and you get out of law school and there's no lawyer jobs, and so you take a job in HR somewhere, or say, you want to have kids and you can't figure out how you're going to balance having kids with a really demanding career, and so you want to step back from your career temporarily to work on your family. And a lot of times, especially women, will feel a lot of shame and kind of failure around that. And I want to just my hope is that we get rid of that feeling of shame and failure, because it's actually just what you're doing is you're just being human. And, we all reinvent. So we did a survey at the University of Kansas for this book where we surveyed over 300 adults and asked them, have you ever reinvented your career at least once, or your job or your career? And 9 out of 10 adults say that they have reinvented at least once. It's the same for men and women. There's no difference there, but where the difference shows up is that women have more frequent reinventions. So women do it on a higher frequency than men. And you can imagine that happens because, work-life balance, the roles and responsibilities of motherhood are often much more labor draining than they are for men. And so, it makes sense within this context. And in addition, we live in a society where the world outside of our home was really built, the labor market was built for the ease of people who have something that I call care privilege, which is essentially you're an able-bodied adult, but you have somebody else taking care of your care needs, somebody else who's cooking your meals, washing your clothes, taking care of your kids. And the labor market is really built for those type of people. And so, if you're somebody like me, who's a woman who, I don't have somebody taking care of my care needs, my spouse and I, we try to split things as evenly as we can, but we are, both on the hook to take care of our 2 kids in the house. And, for better or worse, my kids come to me much more than they go to dad. So even though we try to divvy things up, I usually end up taking the larger weight of that unpaid care work in my house for my family. So, these are just realities of life. And I want us to stop feeling sad or disappointed about reinvention. And the other thing that I'll mention too, since I'm talking about how the labor market really is a space that's built for people with care privilege, there was a study done a couple of years ago looking at patent productivity. So the frequency with which academics publish patents for new products. And the study found that they looked at the baby boom generation, and they found that men peak in their patent production in like their late 20s. Women peak in their patent production in their early 40s. And so that's really an interesting concept, I think, or an interesting factoid, because lots of times what happens is and women peak later because they are interrupted through a process of starting a family, right? And if you think about this from an employer perspective, and let's stick with academia because that's the study focused on academics, once you get your PhD and you start as an assistant professor, you have basically 6 years to get tenure. And so what you have in this example is you had men who were being productive, maximizing their productivity in their late 20s and getting tenure, and women who maybe weren't and were leaving, or they were staying but not as a tenured faculty. And what ended up happening is the universities that let go of the women who didn't have as high productivity as men in their 20s, they lost all that future productivity of those women, and they did not gain any additional peak productivity from the men, because the men started their productivity declined. And so I think employers and the labor market in general, we need to rethink how we value people in the labor market at different points in their life. We need to really think about how we sustain and keep women engaged in the labor market, knowing that there might be moments of time where they have to kind of slow down, but that after that, they're going to have this peak productivity that we're not going to see with men. And so, all of this has to do with reinvention and just reframing how we look at the world and how we look at each other and the things that we value about each other.
Yes, so it goes beyond ourselves.
Yes.
That is one element, but really to then be advocating and really working towards having that change occur universally.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
and valuing it as a part of the process of life, and acknowledging it for that, and just knowing that we all do it. We all have to do it. Reinvent or shrivel away.
Yes, exactly. And it is, yes, maybe it's a reframing of it too, that reinvention really can lead us to better places, more fulfilling places. It can really add that much more energy to everything around us, to the economy, to our own personal lives, our families, that sort of thing. So it's we need to look at it as a constructive thing.
Yeah, and it often does bring us to a better space. And again, we can go back to this idea of Taylor Swift, who again is just the muse for this book. But Taylor has reinvented herself so many times. I mean, the Eras Tour is all about the different eras of her professional life, where she was jumping from reinvention to reinvention, going from country music to pop, from pop music to indie, etc. And if you look at Taylor today, she's a billionaire. She has a massive following. 53% of adults in the United States consider themselves Taylor Swift fans. That wouldn't have happened if she would have just stayed in her country music lane. Her fan base would not be as big as it is today. So she's just one example of where things were getting in her way in her career. Things were pushing her down. She got there's a couple of folks in her industry who started really attacking her or kind of taking advantage of her, and that got her down in the moment. But every time she came back swinging, and all of her reinventions have really helped her to be the success that she is today.
Yes, we have to agree that success is like all caps because of the just the way that it is, and done in such an honoring way. I go back to basing this so much on watching the documentary series and the way that she was with the people she was around, how all the people in her crew really feel seen by her, really feel respected. There's
valued.
Thank you. Yes, valued, and she does that in multiple ways, just by how she gave them, these performance opportunities where they didn't have them in other places, but she recognized the talent and gave them that, and then also, monetarily rewarded them as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, one of my favorite things about this recent 6-part docuseries that came out in December, which you were referring to here, is I really see that as just such a masterclass in women's leadership. Just a class act in women's leadership. And so, if you have any listeners who are women and want to lead or are thinking about leading, or you have folks that are listening here that are interested in understanding what women's leadership looks like, watch that docuseries. It's just amazing.
I'll have to go back and watch it with a different lens rather than, I just want to, soak it all in. So, yes, definitely. And speaking of having these series or having these opportunities for education, you have that opportunity on your website as well for people to take part in different kinds of educational options, right?
Yeah, so I've crafted for teachers. There is some curriculum on my website it's called Swiftynomics 101. It's for high school teachers or college teachers of undergraduates, and really just shows some of it's a cross between understanding economic concepts and using the case study of Taylor Swift to really hone in and help your students understand. And there's a specific case study there that's Swifties versus the NFL, where I talk about the scenario where when Taylor started attending NFL games and kind of the different rhetoric that came out from that in terms of football fans versus Taylor Swift fans.
And that shows up, of course, in your book, too, in Swiftynomics, right? And,
yeah.
It's this kind of relevance and really, we don't follow all of this stuff all of the time because there's just so much. So you bring it to us. And when I read that, I thought, oh, my, it was just eye-opening how the NFL actually embraced it. So interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, she's, Taylor really is kind of the gift that keeps on giving in terms of, all of the things that she's done in her career and all of the ways that she's been active in the public sphere have really created a lot of opportunities for, folks like me who are educators, who are interested in teaching concepts that are somewhat mundane, somewhat boring or complex. Nobody really cares about widgets, but if you take like Econ 101, all you're going to do is study, how you figure out how many widgets a factory should produce. And so I just think it's great to have folks like Taylor, where we can use these examples to try to really engage a younger generation in understanding economic theory.
Yes. And it's always been important, but I look at the world today and I think it's so critical to have this insight, this knowledge, so that we can feel empowered to do this for ourselves, not, just be letting someone else control what it is. And again, she is the role model for doing that. And in terms of yourself, Misty, here you are, being able to connect these dots, bring it to us, so we're paying closer attention and we're going to be doing some self-educating here.
Yeah. And, one of the things that I think is really fun about Taylor, I mean, she's a millennial, and millennial women, they really grew up in a time, I grew up in a time where, so I'm a Gen X, and my parents, when I went off to college, said, you can do anything, you can be anything. And, I believed them. And so I studied whatever I want, what I wanted to study. But I would go home on the weekends or go home for holidays. And it was like all the women were in the kitchen cooking, all the men were sitting out in the, living room watching football or whatever. And that was always like a really tricky concept for me. And so, and the struggle is real. So I believed I could do anything. So I got my PhD. I became a, professional in the federal government and then a university professor, and all of that while having my 2 kids and, having a spouse. And I've been exhausted for the past, 20 years and just like doing all of that. And the millennial women, they've taken a little bit of a different stance on it, and in which they've postponed marriage and coupling up. And, they're the most educated out of any of the generation of women, the most a level of college degree. They really went into college looking for careers. And in their 20s, they just worked and they lived independently, and they had a bunch of discretionary, funds to their available to them. And, Taylor's lucky enough to fall into her career at a time when all the women she was singing about, really had this huge economic power that I don't think we really understood the power of millennial women when they were in their 20s. And, Gen Z even more. I mean, my daughter is Gen Z, and her ability to convince her dad and I to purchase these outrageous things that she finds on social media is crazy. So, the consumer power of Gen Z is like off the charts. But, so I think it is even more important today. And part of it is because women are just, they're owning their space as economic agents in society. And marketers are starting to pay much more attention. Taylor has always paid attention, and it's done her, it's been really profitable and lucrative for her. But other marketers are starting to pay attention. And you even see other companies, everybody wants like a piece of Taylor. So, when the Life of a Showgirl came out, you saw these Sharpie pens all of a sudden were doing social media with like sparkly orange Sharpie pens. Everybody wanted to get in on the bandwagon because Taylor is so powerful in this space.
And I certainly don't have any insight into this than to just be an observer. But in her persona, it's not like she decided she was going to go out and be this. She just wanted to sing. She wanted to create music. She wanted to authentically be this musician, creative that she is. So that's really such an important concept to embrace.
Yeah, and she's always said she wanted to be on a big stage with, thousands and thousands of fans singing and performing, and that's what she's doing now. I think Taylor was really influenced by her grandmother, who was an opera singer and was also a TV host in Puerto Rico. And if you watch that 6-part docuseries, Taylor's Mom talks a little bit about that, what it's like to be the mother, of Taylor and also the daughter of somebody else who was also an entertainer. So it's really interesting how, passion there has really aligned with talent and skill. And, for Taylor, that's much more important for her than, trying to make money or, becoming a billionaire. I don't think she actually really cares about that.
Yeah, it sure didn't come across as anything but genuine love of what she does and love for the fans and all the way that she acknowledged people. Yes, it's something that is so remarkable about that kindness, the gratitude, the appreciation, and the inclusivity that she had, bringing other artists on stage with her. That kind of just knowing that there's enough for everyone was beautiful to witness.
Yeah. And again, that speaks to just her general authenticity and how she lives her life. And, it's just really, I think it's really important for people to align, their own existence with what they're passionate about. And you can really see it shine through when it's done well.
And see, this is how it comes around to then this book and economics and the economy. So there's this real fundamental part of life and how we weave it into our creative self. And we really learn a lot of it here again, this beautiful book, Swiftynomics, How Women Mastermind and Redefine Our Economy. And it's pretty freshly out, came out early this year, so we can pick it up at any of our favorite book sources. Right, Misty?
Yeah, you can pick it up at your local indie store or at bookshop.org, which sources from local indie stores. You can pick it up at Amazon or Barnes & Noble.
Yes, so all of our favorite sources. And we still have the month of April coming up. If you happen to be in some of the more central or eastern parts of the country, check the website and you'll be able to make contact with you in person. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So you can go to swiftynomics.org. The book tour and the dates of the book tour are listed there. Yep. So later in this month, I'll be in the Boston area and then also in the Minneapolis area. So yeah, I'd love to see folks if they're around, come out and we can hang out together.
Doesn't that sound like fun? Well, this, though, has truly been fun. See, we're talking economics and how fun it really is. The message is getting through.
Yeah.
But really, Misty Heggeness, I appreciate you. You just are a marvel. Thank you for this book. And of course, thank you for taking time with us this morning.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
I agree. Thank you for being here this morning to meet these amazing leaders providing us information and insights for ways to be authentically who we are. Please check this station's website for the podcasts for more information about these guests, and please share the stories with your family and friends. I'm Kate Daniels. If you'd like to connect with me, simply send me an email, katedaniels@hubbardradio.com. This wraps up Women's History Month. But let us just continue to make good herstory.
Thank you for listening to Inspirational Women. Tune in every Sunday morning at this time to hear about those truly empowering the Northwest community, all for the greater good. Sunday Morning Magazine and Inspirational Women are a public service of Hubbard Radio Seattle.